Welcome to Next Generation. In this story, you'll discover how one risky idea, born in a tiny Oregon garage, transformed into a global powerhouse worth over $180 billion. This is the story of Nike, a brand that redefined not just athletic wear, but the very idea of victory. But here's the twist. Nike's empire wasn't built by sports legends or billionaires. It began with a young runner who couldn't find the right shoes and a coach who refused to settle for ordinary. Together, they gambled everything: money they didn't have, time they couldn't spare, and reputations they hadn't even built yet. Before Nike's famous swoosh became a global symbol, the company almost collapsed multiple times. The founders faced debt, lawsuits, and betrayal. Yet, somehow, they kept running. And what kept them going wasn't luck, it was risk. A risk that would turn an idea into an empire. By the end of this story, you'll see how one man's obsession with performance, design, and storytelling changed the world of business forever. So lace up. This is how Nike's journey began. The origins, the running spirit of Oregon. The story starts in 1957, on the misty tracks of the University of Oregon. A young middle-distance runner named Phil Knight trained under a relentless coach named Bill Bowerman. Bowerman wasn't just a trainer, he was an inventor, a tinkerer. He obsessed with shaving milliseconds off his athletes' times. Knight admired him deeply, but also noticed something strange. While Bowerman was testing shoe prototypes, most runners were wearing shoes from Japan or Germany, brands like Onitsuka Tiger and Adidas. The American market was dominated by foreign names, and Knight wondered why. He had no money, no connections, and no business experience. But he had an idea. What if Japan, rising after the war, could make running shoes cheaper and better than Germany? And what if he could bring them to America? It was a simple idea, but it would change his life. The spark of a business. After graduating from Oregon, Knight went to Stanford for his MBA. During one of his assignments, he wrote a paper titled, "Can Japanese Sports Shoes Do to German Shoes? What Japanese Cameras Did to German Cameras." His professor called it ambitious. Knight called it destiny. When he graduated in 1962, he decided to test his own theory. With his savings, just $500, he boarded a flight to Japan. There, he visited the Onitsuka Tiger Company, known for making high-quality running shoes. Nervous but determined, he introduced himself as the head of a company that didn't yet exist. He called it Blue Ribbon Sports, the Japanese executives, liked his confidence and agreed to ship him samples. To sell in the U.S., that moment marked the unofficial birth of what would later become Nike Inc. When Knight returned home, his coach Bowerman was intrigued. Together, they agreed to partner. Knight would handle the sales, Bowerman would help with product innovation. The duo started selling shoes out of Knight's car trunk at track meets. There was no office, no marketing team, no store, just ambition and a pile of running shoes. Bowerman's experiments. Innovation before industry. Bill Bowerman was unlike any coach of his era. He didn't just push his runners to train harder, he obsessed over the equipment they used. He would literally tear apart shoes, re-sew them, glue them back together, and test the results on his athletes. One morning, as his wife prepared breakfast, Bowerman poured rubber into her waffle iron to test a new idea for traction. The result? A revolutionary new sole pattern that would become iconic in Nike's future designs: the waffle sole. This innovation wasn't just about comfort, it was about speed, agility, and identity. Bowerman's experiments gave Blue Ribbon Sports an edge that no other shoe distributor had. Their shoes weren't just products, they were performance machines designed by someone who understood athletes. Knight started to sell these modified shoes to runners across Oregon, often loading boxes into his Plymouth Valiant and driving from meet to meet. His charm and passion began to win people over. Slowly, the name Blue Ribbon Sports started circulating in the small but growing American track community. Early struggles. The growing pains of ambition. By 1965, the company was making around $20,000 a year. It was progress, but not enough. The problem was simple. Knight still didn't own the brand. He was merely a distributor for Onitsuka Tiger, and as his success grew, so did the tension between them. The Japanese company began questioning why Knight was selling so many shoes in America without being under their full control. They started talking to other potential U.S. partners behind his back. Knight knew that if Onitsuka pulled the plug, Blue Ribbon Sports would die overnight, so he took another risk. He decided to start building his own brand. In 1971, he and Bowerman secretly developed their first in-house shoe design. They needed a new name, a new logo, and a new identity, something that captured motion, victory, and energy. That's when a young graphic design student named Carolyn Davidson walked into the picture. She was paid just $35 to design a logo. Her creation, a simple curved checkmark, symbolized movement and speed. Knight wasn't convinced at first, but he accepted it anyway. That swoosh would soon become one of the most powerful logos in history. The birth of Nike, the god of victory. They named their new brand Nike, after the Greek goddess of victory. The name was suggested by one of Knight's early employees, Jeff Johnson, who reportedly dreamed it one night and called Knight immediately to share it. When the first shipment of Nike-branded shoes arrived, Knight noticed the boxes were printed slightly wrong. The logo looked uneven. He sighed, laughed, and said, "Well, they'll have to sell anyway." He didn't realize he was holding the future in his hands. Nike's early models, like the Cortez and Waffle Trainer, quickly gained traction with runners. The designs were lighter, faster, and, most importantly, different. They had attitude. But even as sales began to climb, Knight's company was constantly running out of money. Every dollar earned went right back into inventory. His accountant often warned him that the company was over-leveraged. Knight famously replied, "We're growing so fast, the bank doesn't even know what to do with us." Behind the scenes, Nike was running on adrenaline, debt, and pure faith. The turning point: vision versus reality. By 1972, Blue Ribbon Sports officially rebranded to Nike, Inc. The company had grown from a one-man dream into a real business, but it was far from stable. The partnership with Onitsuka finally collapsed, ending in a bitter legal battle. For a small American startup, fighting a large Japanese corporation seemed suicidal. But Knight's team didn't back down. They fought hard, won the case, and gained full control over their future. It was a defining moment. Nike was finally free to build its destiny without foreign interference. Yet freedom came with risk. Without Onitsuka's supply chain, Nike had to build its own manufacturing network from scratch. They sourced materials, negotiated with factories in Asia, and faced countless production delays. Employees worked insane hours, often sleeping at the office. But through the chaos, there was belief, a shared conviction that Nike could become something legendary. Cultural timing, the rise of fitness. Then something remarkable happened. In the mid-1970s, America discovered jogging. It became a cultural movement. Running clubs exploded across cities, and suddenly everyone wanted running shoes. Nike was perfectly positioned. Their marketing tapped into the emotion of personal achievement. It wasn't just about being an athlete. It was about becoming the best version of yourself. They weren't selling shoes anymore. They were selling motivation. Nike's tagline in those early ads was simple yet powerful. There is no finish line. It captured the spirit of persistence and passion that mirrored the company's own journey. Sales skyrocketed. The risk Knight had taken, starting his own brand, fighting legal wars, and betting on innovation, was finally paying off. But this was only the beginning. Because what came next would not only change Nike, it would change sports, marketing, and pop culture forever. The mid-1970s marked a cultural shift in America. People weren't just watching sports anymore, they were living them. Running, fitness, and self-improvement became a lifestyle, and Nike found itself at the center of a revolution it had helped ignite. What had started as a risky business idea was now colliding perfectly with the spirit of a new generation. Phil Knight was still juggling chaos. Shipments delayed, banks calling, and competitors breathing down his neck. But the public didn't see that. What they saw was innovation. What they felt was inspiration. Nike had tapped into something emotional, something that went far beyond sneakers. It was selling confidence, rebellion, and drive. The spirit of innovation, waffle and air. While Nike's marketing began to find its rhythm, Bowerman continued to tinker in his workshop like a mad scientist. He wanted lighter, faster shoes that could make every athlete feel superhuman. His early waffle sole had been a hit, but he wanted to go further. Nike began experimenting with new materials, nylon uppers, foam midsoles, and improved traction patterns. The waffle trainer became a cult favorite, praised by runners for its lightweight feel. Nike was slowly defining a design language, performance fused with simplicity. Then came another revolutionary idea: air. In 1977, an aerospace engineer named Frank Rudy approached Nike with a wild concept. What if air pockets could be embedded into the sole of a shoe to absorb impact? Most executives thought it was ridiculous, but Knight, true to his risk-taking nature, decided to test it. He saw potential where others saw fantasy. The result was the Nike Air Tailwind, released in 1979. It was unlike anything runners had ever seen or felt. With its air cushioning system, it offered a sensation of floating. Runners loved it, and Nike had once again proven that innovation and imagination were their greatest assets. This spirit of risk and experimentation would soon lead to one of the biggest cultural explosions in business. History. The 1980 IPO, from startup to giant. By 1980, Nike had become the #1 athletic shoe company in America. From a tiny startup, it had grown into a powerhouse with over 1,000 employees and nearly $300 million in annual sales. That same year, Nike went public. Phil Knight, who had once borrowed money just to pay for shoe shipments, now found himself standing on Wall Street. When the company's stock began trading, hundreds of Nike employees suddenly became millionaires overnight. But for Knight, it wasn't just about money. It was about validation, that his belief in taking risks, staying stubborn, and betting on himself had paid off. Yet the pressure only grew. Success brought competition, expectations, and the need for reinvention. As the 1980s dawned, Nike was about to face its most defining test: the decline, losing to Reebok. At the start of the decade, Nike seemed unstoppable, but the world of sports fashion was changing fast. Aerobics became the new craze, and a British company named Reebok was quick to capitalize on it. While Nike focused on running shoes for serious athletes, Reebok targeted everyday people, especially women, who were joining fitness classes in record numbers. Their shoes were colorful, comfortable, and trendy. Nike's designs, in comparison, looked too technical. By 1984, Reebok had overtaken Nike in U.S. sales. For the first time, the swoosh was slipping. Inside Nike's headquarters, panic spread. Sales declined, morale dropped, and the media began calling Nike a fad that ran too fast. Phil Knight realized something critical. Nike had forgotten how to dream like its customers. The brand had become too corporate, too mechanical. It needed something, or someone, to bring back the fire. That someone would arrive wearing number 23. Enter Michael Jordan, the game changer. In 1984, a 21-year-old basketball prodigy named Michael Jordan was about to enter the NBA. Every major shoe brand wanted him. He preferred Adidas, but Adidas didn't see him as a priority. Converse already had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, that Nike, desperate to reignite its brand, saw an opportunity others ignored. They decided to take a massive gamble. At the time, Nike's basketball division was struggling. The company had never signed a player as a brand ambassador before. The idea of building a shoe line around one athlete was considered outrageous. But Nike's marketing genius, Sonny Vaccaro, believed Jordan could be the face of a new era. Phil Knight was hesitant. Jordan's agent demanded a contract worth $2.5 million over 5 years, an enormous sum for a rookie. Nike had never paid anything close to that. But Knight once again trusted his instincts. He took the risk, and that single decision would change not only Nike but global sports marketing forever. Air Jordan, the cultural revolution. When Nike designed the first Air Jordan shoe, they broke every rule in the book. The shoes were bold, black and red at a time when NBA rules required players to wear mostly white sneakers. The NBA fined Jordan $5,000 every time he wore them on court. Instead of paying the fine, Nike turned it into a marketing campaign. The NBA threw them out of the game. Fortunately, the public bought them. It was genius. Sales exploded. Within the first year, Nike sold over $100 million worth of Air Jordans. The shoes became a cultural phenomenon, worn not just by athletes, but by kids, celebrities, and musicians. Michael Jordan's charisma, combined with Nike's daring creativity, created something entirely new: the athlete as a brand. Nike was no longer just a sportswear company. It had become a storytelling machine. Advertising as art, the rise of the swoosh. As Nike's popularity soared, so did its marketing ambition. The company hired a small Portland-based ad agency called Weeden + Kennedy to handle its campaigns. Together, they crafted a voice that would define an era. Raw, bold, emotional, instead of focusing on products, Nike ads focused on human spirit, grit, persistence, triumph. Commercials showed athletes pushing past their limits, drenched in sweat, defying odds. The message was always the same: greatness isn't given, it's earned. Then, in 1988, Weeden + Kennedy introduced a slogan that would echo through generations: "Just do it." The phrase was inspired by the last words of a man on death row, a strange origin for a motivational line, but it perfectly captured Nike's essence: simple, universal, fearless. With that slogan, Nike's identity crystallized. It wasn't selling shoes anymore. It was selling belief. The brand as a movement. By the late 1980s, Nike had become a movement. Its commercials weren't ads, they were manifestos. The swoosh became a global badge of ambition, recognized from Tokyo to New York. Nike's roster of athletes expanded: Bo Jackson, John McEnroe, Charles Barkley, and later Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, and Cristiano Ronaldo. Each represented a different side of human potential, but they all carried the same message: dare to take risks, dare to win. Inside Nike's headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon, the company fostered a culture of boldness. Employees were encouraged to experiment, fail, and try again. One of Knight's favorite sayings was, "Play by the rules, but be ferocious." The formula worked. By 1989, Nike controlled nearly 50% of the U.S. athletic shoe market. Revenues passed $1 billion. The swoosh wasn't just surviving, it was conquering. The legacy of risk. Every success story hides a foundation of risk, and Nike was no exception. From Knight's first trip to Japan to the creation of Air Jordan, every milestone came from defying conventional logic. When banks said no, Knight borrowed from friends. When competitors laughed, Bowerman kept experimenting. When the industry said Nike was finished, the company reinvented itself. Each time, the same principle held true: progress demands courage. Nike's story was proof that sometimes the biggest victories come from the moments of greatest uncertainty. The expansion beyond sports. As the 1990s approached, Nike was ready to transcend categories. It expanded beyond running and basketball into lifestyle, fashion, and global culture. The swoosh began appearing not just on athletes, but on musicians, artists, and everyday people who identified with its message of empowerment. Nike was no longer selling a product. It was selling an idea. The idea that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things if they just believed enough to try. That emotional connection made Nike untouchable. But success also brought challenges. Global expansion meant new scrutiny, labor issues, production ethics, and brand image controversies. How Nike handled those would define the next chapter of its journey. By the early 1990s, Nike was no longer just an American brand. It was a global symbol of ambition. The swoosh had crossed oceans, appearing on athletes and billboards from Brazil to Beijing. What started as Phil Knight's personal obsession had grown into an empire of inspiration. But global success brought global problems. As Nike expanded its manufacturing across Asia, the company began facing a new kind of scrutiny, one that couldn't be solved with design or marketing alone. The next decade would test Nike's values, its leadership, and its identity more than ever before. The 1990s, the golden era of influence. The 1990s were the age of icons, and Nike had mastered the art of making them. Every great athlete became a storyteller, and Nike was the narrator. Michael Jordan wasn't just a basketball player. He was a living myth. His Air Jordan line had evolved from sneakers into cultural currency. Each year, Nike pushed out new designs with innovative technology, visible air bubbles, lighter materials, sleeker aesthetics. The Air Max series became a streetwear phenomenon. For the first time, sneakers weren't just for sports, they were fashion statements. Nike understood something no other company did. People didn't just want to play like athletes, they wanted to feel like them. The company's advertising continued to blur the line between performance and emotion. Commercials like Bo Knows and I Am Not a Role Model turned sports into philosophy. Nike had mastered not only innovation but also identity marketing. It didn't sell shoes. It sold purpose. Global expansion, conquering the world. With dominance secured in America, Nike turned its gaze overseas. Europe, Asia, and Latin America represented untapped potential. The company invested heavily in international distribution, local sponsorships, and regional campaigns. In 1996, Nike opened its first major retail store in London, a massive space that doubled as a cultural hub for athletes and fans. It wasn't just a shop, it was an experience. Customers could test shoes, customize products, and feel part of the movement. Meanwhile, in Asia, Nike became a symbol of Western aspiration. The brand's sleek imagery, celebrity endorsements, and just-do-it spirit resonated deeply with youth cultures hungry for self-expression. But behind the success story, dark clouds were gathering. Nike's global supply chain, spread across dozens of factories, was about to become its biggest controversy yet. The scandal, sweatshops, and backlash. In the mid-1990s, journalists and activists began investigating working conditions in overseas factories producing Nike products. Reports surfaced of low wages, long hours, and poor safety conditions. The headlines were brutal. Nike's shoes, made in misery. For a company built on the idea of empowerment, these accusations were devastating. Public opinion turned sharply. College students organized protests, celebrities called out the hypocrisy, and Nike found itself branded as the villain of globalization. Phil Knight, who had always preferred to stay behind the scenes, suddenly found himself forced into the spotlight. Critics accused him of prioritizing profit over people. For the first time since Nike's founding, Knight wasn't sure if the brand could recover. Facing the fire, responsibility, and reform, instead of hiding, Knight made a bold decision. He confronted the crisis head-on. In 1998, during a speech at the National Press Club, he admitted, "The Nike product has become synonymous with slave wages, forced overtime, and arbitrary abuse. I truly believe that the American consumer doesn't want to buy products made under abusive conditions. The responsibility rests with us." It was a defining moment of accountability in corporate history. Knight promised sweeping reforms, auditing factories, improving labor standards, and increasing transparency. Nike, began working directly with human rights organizations and implemented one of the world's first corporate responsibility programs for global manufacturing. The company also began publishing detailed reports on its factory conditions, something unheard of at the time. Slowly, Nike began to rebuild trust. The scandal that almost destroyed the brand ultimately made it stronger and more self-aware. Reinvention through technology. The Air Revolution. Even amid criticism, Nike's product innovation never stopped. The late 1990s saw a wave of groundbreaking designs that redefined what performance footwear could be. The Nike Air Max 97 introduced a full-length Air unit, sleek, futuristic, and instantly iconic. The Air Zoom and Shox lines followed, merging science and style in ways that captured both athletes and sneaker collectors alike. Then, in the 2000s, Nike began investing heavily in digital integration. The partnership with Apple led to the Nike Plus iPod in 2006, an early fitness tracking system that allowed runners to sync their performance data. It was a glimpse into the future of wearable technology. Nike's design teams weren't just following trends, they were creating them. Shoes like the Free Run and Fly Knit introduced sustainable materials and advanced knitting techniques, reducing waste and improving comfort. Each new technology carried the same DNA, innovation driven by risk. Branding beyond sports, the cultural era. As the world entered the digital age, Nike understood that sports were no longer confined to fields and courts. They were part of everyday culture, music, art, streetwear, and social identity. Nike began collaborating with artists, musicians, and designers. Partnerships with icons like Kanye West, Virgil Abloh, and Travis Scott blurred the lines between athletic wear and high fashion. The Air Yeezy collaboration in 2009 shocked the industry, proving that sneakers could be luxury items. Later, Virgil Abloh's The 10 collection transformed classic Nike silhouettes into works of art. These moves weren't just marketing, they were cultural statements. Nike had evolved from a performance brand into a global lifestyle icon. Its message remained consistent. Greatness isn't about winning, it's about daring. Sustainability, a new kind of victory. Having faced its past controversies, Nike shifted its focus toward a new kind of leadership: sustainability. The company launched initiatives to reduce carbon emissions, recycle materials, and eliminate waste from production lines. The Move to Zero campaign became Nike's public commitment to a zero-carbon, zero-waste future. Factories were redesigned to be more energy efficient, and shoes were made with recycled polyester and renewable materials. Nike began encouraging athletes to speak about environmental responsibility, turning the company's message into a movement for change. In a world increasingly concerned about climate and ethics, Nike aimed to lead not only in performance but in purpose. The power of storytelling. Marketing reinvented. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Nike doubled down on what it did best: storytelling that inspired millions. Campaigns like Find Your Greatness, Dream Crazy, and You Can't Stop Us celebrated diversity, courage, and the human spirit. Nike embraced social movements, supported athletes who took stands, and turned brand messaging into activism. When NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick became a polarizing figure for kneeling during the national anthem, Nike made him the face of its campaign with the line, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." The ad sparked controversy, but also loyalty. Sales spiked. The message was clear. Nike wasn't afraid to take sides when it mattered. This wasn't just marketing, it was legacy building. Digital domination, the future of retail. As e-commerce reshaped the retail landscape, Nike pivoted faster than anyone. It invested in digital apps, direct-to-consumer platforms, and personalized shopping experiences. Nike Run Club and Nike Training Club became ecosystems for athletes and everyday users alike, offering coaching, challenges, and data tracking. The SNKRS app turned sneaker drops into global events, where millions competed to snag limited releases. In 2020, when the pandemic shut down physical stores, Nike's digital sales soared by over 80%. The company proved its adaptability once again, turning crisis into opportunity. Nike wasn't just a brand anymore, it was an ecosystem. The return of the founder, legacy and reflection. In 2016, after more than 50 years leading the company, Phil Knight officially stepped down as chairman. In his memoir, Shoe Dog, he reflected on the journey, the sleepless nights, the debts, the doubts, and the relentless belief that risk was the only path to greatness. He wrote, "The cowards never started, and the weak died along the way. That leaves us." It was a fitting summary of Nike's spirit, a company born from struggle, sustained by courage and elevated by vision. Knight's story had come full circle. The young runner who once sold shoes out of his car had built an empire recognized on every continent. Resilience redefined. The modern Nike. Today, Nike stands as one of the most valuable brands in the world, worth over $180 billion. Its swoosh represents not perfection, but progress. From handcrafted waffle soles to AI-driven performance wear, from protest movements to fashion runways, Nike continues to evolve, guided by the same philosophy that started it all: dare to dream and take the risk. As the company moves into the future, it carries with it a legacy not just of products, but of purpose. By the 2020s, Nike had become more than a sportswear company. It was a living, breathing symbol of aspiration. The swoosh wasn't just a logo anymore. It was a mindset, an emblem of human drive, worn by millions who saw themselves reflected in its story, from struggle to success, from fear to fearlessness. And yet, even after more than half a century, Nike's journey was far from over. The company that started with a dream in a garage continued to reinvent itself for every generation that dared to chase something greater. The digital transformation, a brand built for tomorrow. As the world accelerated into the digital age, Nike didn't just adapt, it led. The company began transforming its business model around data, personalization, and experience. Through Nike Fit and Nike App, the brand created tools that scanned a user's foot through their smartphone camera to recommend perfect shoe sizes. Nike by You allowed customers to design their own sneakers, choosing colors, materials, and patterns, a personalized bond between creator and consumer. This wasn't just technology, it was empowerment. Nike was handing the creative reins back to the people, turning buyers into co-designers. The digital revolution also redefined storytelling. Social media became Nike's new arena. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube became stages where athletes, influencers, and everyday dreamers shared their journeys, each one a reflection of the "just do it" spirit. For a generation raised online, Nike wasn't just a brand they wore, it was a language they spoke. Innovation never sleeps, the next frontier of design. Nike's R&D teams continued to push boundaries. Flyknit technology evolved into Space Hippie, a line of sneakers made entirely from recycled materials. 3D printing began shaping prototypes overnight, cutting down waste and production time. The company even experimented with self-lacing shoes, introduced in 2019 as the Nike Adapt BB, inspired by the futuristic dreams once seen only in movies. The shoes adjusted automatically to the wearer's foot, controlled through a smartphone app. Nike wasn't chasing trends, it was creating them. Every new product carried the DNA of innovation that had fueled the company since Bowerman poured rubber into that waffle iron decades earlier. From handcrafted experiments to AI-driven design, Nike's story had come full circle. Proof that technology and imagination could coexist beautifully. The power of purpose beyond profit. In a time when consumers demanded more authenticity and accountability, Nike positioned itself as a brand with purpose. It wasn't enough to just sell shoes. The company wanted to inspire change. The Move to Zero initiative, launched to achieve zero carbon and zero waste, became central to its identity. Every campaign, product line, and partnership was tied to sustainability. Nike began turning plastic bottles and old sneakers into new products, reducing its carbon footprint across supply chains. The company also championed inclusivity, designing adaptive footwear like the Nike Flyease for people with disabilities, and creating apparel lines that embraced all body types. Nike's message was clear. Victory isn't just measured in medals, but in moments of progress for people, communities, and the planet. Empowering communities, the social impact era. Beyond its global presence, Nike started investing heavily in grassroots programs. Through Nike Community Impact Fund, it supported youth sports, local coaching programs, and mentorship initiatives around the world. The goal was simple: to give every child the opportunity to play, to dream, and to discover their potential. In inner cities, Nike built basketball courts and sponsored after-school programs. In developing regions, it partnered with NGOs to provide equipment and access to sports facilities. For Nike, community wasn't a marketing angle. It was a responsibility. The same belief that had driven Phil Knight and Bill Bowerman to empower people through movement was now the company's guiding purpose on a global scale. Resilience in a changing world. The COVID-19 pandemic tested every business on the planet. Stores closed, supply chains broke, and consumer behavior shifted overnight. Yet, Nike's digital-first strategy allowed it to thrive when others stumbled. The Nike Training Club app was made free to the public, providing millions of people with workout routines, motivation, and community during lockdowns. The brand's message of perseverance found new meaning in a world filled with uncertainty. Sales rebounded faster than anyone predicted. By 2021, Nike's digital revenue exceeded $10 billion annually, a milestone that proved innovation and adaptability weren't optional, but essential. Even in crisis, Nike didn't slow down. It ran faster. Leadership transitions from Knight to the next generation. As Nike moved further into the future, it continued evolving under new leadership. After Phil Knight stepped aside, CEOs like Mark Parker and John Donahoe carried the torch, focusing on technology, sustainability, and digital transformation. Knight remained a guiding figure, often describing himself as the brand's spiritual coach. He once said, "If you want to understand Nike, look at the athlete. We're all trying to get a little better, a little faster, a little stronger." Under Donahoe's leadership, Nike's focus shifted even more toward personalization and innovation through digital platforms, AI analytics, and immersive experiences like Nike Rise, interactive stores that blend technology with local sports culture. The message was timeless. Progress never stops. The global language of the swoosh. Today, the swoosh transcends geography, culture, and language. It represents not just athletic excellence, but the universal pursuit of greatness. From Olympic stadiums to urban streets, from pro athletes to local dreamers, everyone recognizes that single curved line. In Africa, young footballers wear Nike jerseys as symbols of hope. In Asia, sneakers are status symbols of creativity and individuality. In Europe and America, Nike's apparel defines both fashion and function. Few brands in history have become this universal. The swoosh doesn't need translation. It speaks ambition in every language. The art of storytelling. The eternal flame. What truly separates Nike from every competitor is not just its technology, but its storytelling. Every campaign is a cinematic moment, every slogan a call to action. From "Just Do It" to "Dream Crazier," Nike tells stories that make people feel. It reminds them that greatness begins with belief, and that risk is the bridge between who you are and who you could become. The company understands that emotion sells better than logic. People don't remember shoes. They remember how those shoes made them feel when they crossed a finish line, hit a goal, or defied the odds. That's the real secret behind Nike's success. It doesn't sell products. It sells transformation. The philosophy of risk, the heart of Nike's legacy. Every chapter of Nike's story is built on one theme: risk. Phil Knight risked his savings on a dream. Bowerman risked failure by experimenting with ideas no one understood. Nike risked controversy by taking stands that divided audiences but united believers. From the first handmade prototype to global digital ecosystems, risk was never an obstacle. It was the engine. Nike teaches a timeless truth: progress isn't comfortable. Every great leap forward requires stepping into uncertainty. That's how empires are built, not through luck, but through fearless action. And in that sense, Nike isn't just a brand, it's a philosophy. The legacy, from one dreamer to millions. Today, more than 75,000 employees across the world wake up every morning under the same mission that started it all: to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete on the planet. And as Phil Knight famously said, "If you have a body, you are an athlete." That statement expanded the definition of sports and reminded the world that potential lives in everyone. Whether it's a child playing barefoot in a village or an Olympic gold medalist on the podium, the drive to do better unites them all under the swoosh. Nike's success isn't measured by revenue or market cap. It's measured by how many people it pushes to believe in themselves. Final reflection: the eternal race. As the sun sets over Nike's Beaverton campus, a bronze statue of Bill Bowerman still stands tall, gazing toward the company's running track. It's a silent reminder of where everything began: an old coach, a restless runner, and a dream too bold to ignore. That's the spirit that built Nike, the risk that turned an idea into an empire, the belief that greatness is not given, it's earned, step by step, mile by mile. Nike's journey is far from over. Its next chapters will be written by new dreamers, new innovators, and new believers who carry the same fire that once burned in Knight and Bowerman's hearts. Because in the world of Nike, there's still no finish line.